Hello everybody, welcome back again. Jiu-Jitsu 2000 here today. I have a few items on the bench and hopefully you just finished watching the casting 30 caliber 160 grain round nose 30 bullets. But in this video, part 2, I'm going to talk about reloading that bullet. Okay, now first thing is first, as always, again, safety glasses. Clear of obstructions, make sure they're not scratched up, that you can see through them. I'm going to go over the table a little bit and just take you through some of the items that you might need. Okay, first thing is your brass. You'll need a set of dies, you'll need some bullets, some powder, you'll need some primers. I have primers. These are Winchester large rifle primers. I just have them in a bag. You'll need a scale, digital or analog, a balance. You'll need some calipers. I like to have a case brush. You'll need a deburring tool and chamfering tool. Some way of trimming your cases, and in our case we're going to use the Lee lock stud and shell holder with the Lee cutter and length gauge. You're going to need a funnel. And did I mention powder? Today we're going to use Alliant Unique. I like to have a drill handy to use for the trimming tools. You might need a pair of channel locks to put your dies to tighten the lock rings. Flashlight, that's not a bad idea when you're reloading. Some sort of scoop to scoop powder if you need to, because you don't ever want your fingers to touch the powder, because your fingers have oils in them that could get into the powder. And last but not least, you need a recipe book. One thing that I like to do is I like to take a scratch piece of paper, read the recipe that I'm going to be doing, and I like to write it down. So I'm going to go do that and I'll be back to show you what I'm talking about. Okay, so I've taken my Lyman cast bullet handbook and I have opened it up to the 30 Winchester page, and I got all my load data out of there. And let me show you what I've found. So I've wrote down these cards. 30 Winchester, that's what we're going to load. The brass that we're going to be using today is all Winchester brass. 160 grain Lee round nose cast bullet that we've sized to 308. We're going to use Winchester large rifle primers. Alliant Unique is going to be our powder. The trim length, 2.039 inches. The maximum overall length is 2.55 inches, but will probably be a little shorter than that. Now, powder, they give you a start load of 7 grains, which is 1255 feet per second, and a max load of 10 grains, which is 1582 feet per second. We're going to run ours right dead smack in the middle, about 8.5 grains of powder. So we should be getting around 1400 feet per second, I'm guessing. So this is my load data. I highly recommend that you do this when you load. Write it down on a piece of paper. That way it's nice and clear and it's easy for you to access and you don't make any mistakes. Very good reference to look at whenever you need to see it. Okay, first thing I want to do is I want to take a little bit of 3-in-1 oil, raise the ram, and just put a couple little drops of oil on my press on both sides of the ram, just to kind of get it nice and lubricated. A lot of people reload, but they forget this simple step. Okay, you remember our pledge from earlier? Here's a trick, folks. This is a good brass lubricant. Works great. It's very inexpensive and it works good. So I'm going to lube the brass and just let them sit there. And in the meantime, I'm going to go ahead and install my decapping die. So today's dies, we're going to be using the full length die set RCBS 30 Winchester. Now in this set, it comes with 2 dies. This one with the little pin sticking out of the bottom is the decapping and resizing die, and this is the die that we're going to use first. But we need a shell holder. Make sure that you don't get this type of shell holder confused with the shell holders that go in the Lee Auto Prime tool. And basically all the shell holder does is exactly what its name is. It holds the brass. That's all it does. So we're going to raise the ram a little bit and use the corresponding notch in the ram to install the shell holder just by pushing with your finger. Now the shell holder is installed. From here we want to raise the ram all the way up and threading the decapping die down until we feel the die body touch the shell holder. Once you feel it touch, tighten your die lock ring, take a pair of channel locks, and just give it a little tiny snug. Doesn't have to be anything crazy. From here, our brass is ready, and we're going to start to decap them. This partner press has a small cup that fits on the side of the press, and what this does is when the brass, or excuse me, when you're decapping, the old primer goes through a hole on this far side and it falls into this cup. I'll show you that here in a second from another angle. So I'm basically going to take a piece of brass that's already been lubricated. I'm going to put it into the shell holder, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to raise the ram, and two things are going to happen on the upstroke. This pin, this decapping pin, as I raise the ram, it's going to push the old primer out. Did you hear that? And it's also going to full length resize the whole case. Now as the ram comes down, you'll feel this little catch, and what that catch is that's the case mouth stuck on the expander ball. And I just continue down. So what happens to the case mouth is as it goes up into the die, it kind of gets tight like this, and as the case comes back down, the expander ball comes around and it gives you this diameter. Okay, so it's knocked out the old primer and it's resized the full length of the case. Now I want to take my case mouth brush and just very quickly give it a little clean. I'm going to set that case aside and continue the process with the rest of the cases. 1, 2, case mouth brush, get another one. I'll do 5 and then I'll switch the angle. Now this press happens to have a little priming arm right here. Now technically I could be priming them too right now in this step, but because I'm going to talk about that in a minute anyway, I'm just going to do that in a separate step. That's the 5th one. Take my case mouth brush and just kind of clean the case mouth. RCBS makes very good products. See this little hole on the side? Right there? That's where the primer comes out. Okay, now I'm going to take these cases and I'm just going to put them back into my little rag here. Fold the corners up, and my plan is to get rid of any excess pledge that might be on this brass. So I'm just cleaning it up, trying to get that excess pledge off. So I want these nice and clean, but I don't want them wet anymore with pledge. So there they are. They've all been sized, deprimed, resized, everything's ready to go. Now it's time to trim them. Okay, so what I have here is I have a Lee lock stud and I have a cordless drill. Basically, I'm going to insert the Lee lock stud into the cordless drill. And on the lock stud, I have the Lee shell holder that's threaded for the lock stud, and this is what we're going to use to hold the cases so that we can trim them. So basically, what you want to do with the decapped case, you want to put them in the lock stud like this, and slowly close the drill. What that'll do is that'll make the case go in the drill, and then you can spin it. From here, you use the case length, the Lee length gauge. You put it in, and as you rotate and spin the case and hold this cutter, you're going to start to trim the brass. When you get finished, you'll notice that they're kind of shiny. If you look at one that hasn't been trimmed and compare it to one that has, you see that one that has is much, much shinier. You'll also notice that around the tip of the brass here, there's kind of a catch. And what that is, that's a little burr that we're going to use our deburring tool to get rid of. Very slow, nothing too crazy. We're going to go inside the case mouth. When you go inside the case mouth to deburr the inside, don't take a lot of material off. So that one there is done. It's been sized. You can also use your rag at this point if you want to polish the brass up a little more. So that one's done. Now I got to go through and do all of these. Now when it comes to trimming, this is not a process that you have to do every time. You know, so if I trim them this time around, I probably won't have to trim them next time. I basically trim my brass every other load. And a lot of people ask me, how long does brass last before you have to retire it? Well, I look at it in reference to trimming. I don't trim it, oh gosh, maybe 3-4 times at the most. On that fourth trim, I'm pretty much ready to retire that brass. Because what happens is as the brass stretches over its life, and when you trim it, because it's getting too long, what you don't realize sometimes is the case mouth neck is probably getting thin. And I'm saying this diameter here. It gets a little bit thin. This process, you know, I know I'm notorious for long videos, and that's not my intention, but I like to show everything. I would rather show more than I need to and have it be a longer video than to miss something and have people wondering, like, what should I do there, or what's, you know. So that's why I sit here and I trim them all, powder them all. Hope I'm not boring you. But you know, I look at it like this, you know, I'm going to be doing this stuff anyway, might as well take you along with me. The only problem is when it comes time to upload a video, gosh, they take forever because I shoot everything in high definition. And gosh, sometimes I leave my computer on all night long uploading video. So with that being said, I hope that you viewers out there, I hope you appreciate that. You know, it takes a long time to upload these videos. Hope you recognize that and understand that. And there's a lot of things I could be doing instead of sitting by the computer. And I do. Sometimes I'll get the computer going, you know, uploading, and then I'll just leave. Maybe go out to the woods or something and leave the computer running. And when I come back, sometimes all my videos are uploaded. And other times I'll come back and I'll find that there was a failure. You know, oh, video such and such failed to upload. And that's crazy because, you know, the way I do my videos, I make a bunch of little videos, a bunch of little parts, and I upload them individually. So for example, this video that you're watching right now, it might have 10 or 15 little parts. And once I get them all individually uploaded, then I put them together. So when I have one of them that fails, boy, it kind of puts a wrench in my gears. It's like I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 failed, 8, 9, 10, you know, or something like that, or successful. Then I got them all out of order. Okay, we got our cases trimmed, they're decapped, they're resized, they're ready to prime. So I'm going to swing out my old primer arm here. And basically what I do is I take a primer and I make sure that the primer has the little anvil. If you put a primer in a case that does not have an anvil, there's a good chance, well, in fact, there's an absolute chance that that case won't go off. So I basically put the primer in the cup, raise the ram slightly, put the case in, and using my fingers to hold the press and my thumb, I just kind of push the handle, raise it again, and voila, we have a nice primed case. So I'm basically going to do that 10 times. Whoops. Put the primer in the cup, raise the ram, lower. When it comes to seating the primer, you want to make sure that the primer is seated flush or just a little bit below flush. You don't want a primer bulging out. So I just kind of run my finger over them as I do it. And make sure that they all have anvils. If you have a primer that does not have an anvil, it is not going to ignite. Because it's that anvil that the priming compound comes in contact with, and that's what causes the ignition. So it's a very important detail. A lot of people make excellent reloading videos out there, but I don't see many people talking about the primers and making sure that they have the anvil. I like to do my priming on the press when I can, because it gives you a pretty good amount of leverage to prime those cases. Okay, now it's time to powder our cases. I have an electronic digital scale and I have a balance scale. And basically what I want to do is I want to get a charge of 8.5 grains. So I'm going to use the bowl, the same bowl for my digital scale that I'm using on my balance scale. And the reason that I'm able to do that is because when I turn this scale on, it will zero to whatever bowl is sitting on it. So we need 8.5 grains of powder. There's 6.6. I have a little trickler here I can use to trickle up if I need to. If you want the scale to read again, just kind of lift the bowl. We're looking for 8.5 grains. 7 grains. 7.3. 7.4. 7.7. I don't know if you can see the numbers or not. Eight grains. 8.2. 8.3. 8.5. So we've reached our desired amount of powder that we want, 8.5 grains. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to verify that powder charge that the electronic scale just gave me. I'm going to verify that against my balance scale. So these are in increments of 5. So 8.5 would have been about right there. Let's see what we got here. Looks like that needle's right on the money. Right on the money. Okay, so let me talk to you a little bit. Each one of these small lines, like this little big line, I guess you could call it, that's 25, 50, this would be 75 and 100. So each one of these small lines is 5. So I went to 5 plus 3 is 8, and between 3 and 4, 3.5. So that's 8.5 grains. And you can see that we're zeroed. So that means that our digital scale is right on the money. So I'm going to go ahead and pour that charge into my case. And you notice, as I pour the charge, I am moving the bullet, or should I say the case, from this side over somewhere totally different. You know, it's over here by on my bench. So I'm moving it from one side to the whole other side. Now we're going to put 8.5 more grains. And the cool thing about these balance scales is they're what they call magnetically dampened. It's still not enough. Starting to move. That looks pretty good. 8.5 grains. Now one thing that you want to note is when you look at your powder charge that you're going to be throwing, don't forget what your start and your max is. So max is 10, so if we threw one that was 9, 9.5, anything under 10 or anything above 7, we're really good as long as we're within the spectrum. So even though I'm being a little bit anal, for the lack of a better term, it's okay, because we're going to have some good quality ammunition that's very consistent. So let's do the process again. Looks like that's a little bit light, so we'll throw a little more. We could trickle if we wanted to. Looks good. You could also put this right in the case just like so. Gotta be a little more careful, but I like using a funnel myself. See, because that's not going too well for me. You notice that my funnel is getting a lot of static. One thing that I've noticed over the years of reloading to eliminate that static is using a dryer sheet and rubbing your plastic components down. That helps minimize the amount of static that you get quite a bit. Now that load there is a little bit hot, so I'm going to pull just a little bit out of there. Take a look. Still a hair hot. That looks good. So I'm going to go ahead and finish charging these cases and I'll be back. Okay, I'd like to share a little technique with you. Right now I have a load of powder in the scale and it's balanced at 0, so that's our target weight of approximately 8.5 grains. I have an empty piece of brass sitting on my scale, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn my scale on and zero it to that piece of brass. See, the scale's now zeroed. Now I'm going to take the brass off of the scale and pour the charge into the brass. That'll work fairly quickly, and set the brass back on the scale and see what the charge says. 8.2. So we're doing okay. 8.3. So that's another way of measuring your charges. You could zero your scale, throw the charge, and then weigh the brass again. Okay, I have all of these cases charged. Now what I like to do is I like to go through and I like to check them against each other just to verify the powder charge, just to make sure that everything's looking good, that I don't have one that's high or one that's low or one that's missing powder or anything like that. And in our case today, everything looks good. Okay, now it's time for us to start thinking about removing our decapping and resizing die and installing our bullet seating die. So I'm just going to loosen the lock ring and take the die out of the press. Nothing crazy here. Take my die box and put this die back in, because I don't need that die anymore. Now I'm going to take my bullet seating / crimp die, and I like to make sure that the bullet seating stem is backed all the way out. From here, I want to take a loaded case, raise the ram all the way up, and thread the die down until the die body touches the case mouth. There it is. Feel that touch? Once you touch the case mouth, lower the ram and back out the die 1 full turn. There's half a turn. There's 1 full turn, and lock the die lock ring. What this will do, the reason we backed the die out is because we backed off the crimping feature of the die at this point in time. Now we are going to come back and crimp. We're just not going to do it right now. So again, verifying that this case has powder in it, we're going to put a loaded case. We're going to slowly raise the ram, and nothing's going to happen because the bullet seating stem is backed out all the way. So once the ram's in the utmost position, we want to tighten the bullet seating stem down until we touch the bullet. See that? And we're barely seating. So we're going to make small turns clockwise, and we're going to continue to seat the bullet a little bit. Now if you notice, on these bullets, right here is a crimping groove. So I'm just lowering the ram and making small adjustments on the bullet seating stem. Now let's go ahead and take the bullet out and measure our overall length. Now again, our max overall length is 2.55 inches. See that? Max overall length 2.55. So we need to be under that. So let's take a look and see where we're at. .59. So we're getting close. So I'm going to put the bullet back in and tighten the bullet seating stem clockwise just slightly. Raise the ram. That'll seat the bullet again. Now I'm going to come over here and check again the length. .57. So we're pretty close. And so I need to make another adjustment on my bullet seating stem. So it's this little screw, and I'm going to turn it clockwise. Now the closer that you get to your desired overall length, the smaller the increment needs to be on your bullet seating stem. You don't want to go too big of increments, because if you do, you might go past it. 2.55. So let's go ahead and take it all the way to this crimp groove. So I'm going to go like about a 1/16 of an inch. So let's go about 1 full turn. Raise the ram. Let's take a look. Go a little more. I'm looking for that crimp groove, and basically what I'm wanting to do is I'm wanting to put this brass into the cantilever, I guess you could call it. So make very small increments. And that looks good. Let's measure that and see what we are in length. Probably 2.4 something, I'm guessing. 2.519, so 2.52 basically. So that's fine. That's a perfect length. So now we've established the overall length that we like. So from here we want to establish a crimp now. Now this is going to sound counterintuitive what I'm about to say, but it's necessary because this die has two functions. Now we've just established the length that we want, but now we need to establish the crimp. So I'm going to back out counterclockwise the bullet seating stem all the way out. I'm going to unlock the die lock ring, come up a couple turns on the die lock ring, and again I'm going to insert the loaded case into the press and raise the ram all the way up. Now I'm going to lower the die body down until I feel it touch the case. Once I feel it touch the case mouth, I'm going to lower the ram and make small 1/8 of a turn increments on the die body and then raise the ram. Inspect the cartridge for crimp. Nothing yet. Another 1/8 of a turn. Raise the ram. You'll feel it. You can feel it bite a little bit. And I'm looking for a crimp. And what I mean by crimp is the brass is just kind of bend into the cantilever a little bit. Make sure that you're making small increments, because if you make too big of an increment on your crimp feature here, you will damage the neck, the shoulder and neck area of the brass. You can see that I did that mildly on this one. Got little ripples in it, so we're going to leave that one alone for now. And I think that crimp that we have there is all we need. I'm going to back it out just a hair, lock this ring, and then what I want to do is I want to match the bullet seating depth now. So I'm going to thread the bullet seating stem all the way down till it touches the top of the bullet. Then I'm going to lock the small bullet seating stem lock ring. Everything about this die now is set. From here, I'm going to set that one aside, take another charged case, and if I've done everything correctly, when I seat this bullet, it's going to crimp the case as well as seat. So the die is going to perform two actions. Yep, and we didn't roll the shoulder at all. So we have a nice little roll crimp on the bullet. We have a good seating depth, and everything looks good. Take another charged case, seat the bullet. Be very conservative about it. You don't want anything to be hard or anything like that. See, so once you get this die set, it's very easy to do two operations at once. The main thing is you got to be very sensitive to the handle on your press. You know, you don't want to just crank on the handle, because these presses have a lot of power, a lot of leverage, a lot of torque to them, and what they'll end up doing is crunching cases. So you want to have a very good sense of sensitivity to the bullets that you're making. Another thing that I can't stress enough is before you seat a bullet, make sure you look down into the case mouth and verify that that charge, you know, that case is charged. Yeah, these bullets look good. I'm not rippling the shoulder at all. Okay, so again, I have a charged case, a bullet, raise the ram, nice and slow, nothing too crazy. It's a nice looking bullet, does a good job. You know, and that first one was a very good example of what can happen to the shoulder if you make too big of an increment on the crimp feature. Yeah, see, these are all looking good. If you feel anything bind or anything like that on your press, it's very important to stop and look at it and see what's going on with it. I've seen a lot of people just, you know, they'll get something stuck on there and they'll just push harder. You know, you can't do that. It doesn't work that way. You need to stop and inspect and see what's going on. So these look good. We're done seating bullets. Okay, once again I'm going to check my overall length of 2.5. That's the max. I'm going to check one of these completed rounds. Oops, let's zero our scale again. Or excuse me, our calipers. So as long as we're below 2.55, we're good. 2.5315. Let's check them. 2.533. So these are all pretty good. 2.534. So these are all looking pretty good. 2.53. So I'm going to write that on my paper, 2.53. That way I know that that's what these overall lengths are. Okay, here we are, 2.53. I just wrote it down as a reference. And this was the first one that I did. You can see the shoulder had a little bit of a booger on it. That's where I got a little excited on the crimp feature. I'm kind of glad that that happened actually, because it lets us show you something that can happen. And around the top here you see where my fingernail is. I don't know if you can see it, but from where the bullet seating stem pushed on the bullet, all it did right there is removed a little liquid A-LOX. So it's not as bad. But I'm just basically going through these bullets and I'm looking at them and I'm inspecting them, just making sure everything looks good. The shoulders look good, everything looks good. Just a quick inspection, doesn't take anything, you know, crazy. Just quick, make sure I didn't miss anything, or make sure none of the brass looks bad. If you have a case length gauge, right now would be a good time to use it. I don't have one for the 30-30. Probably end up getting one because I really like them. But yeah, all these bullets look good. And one more thing I want to say before I go is make sure that you keep your paperwork with your bullets so that you know exactly what they are. Wherever these bullets go, you know, if you give them to a friend or if you put them in a pack and you forget about it and you come across them a year later, you'll know exactly what the recipe is on them, what those bullets are, how much powder, what kind of bullet you got. That's very important. I highly recommend it. I do that with all of my reloads. You know, I can pull out bullets that I reloaded 5 years ago and tell you exactly what's in them. So again, I want to say thank you everybody for watching my video. Thanks for supporting my channel. Feel free as always to comment, like, thumbs up, share. Feel free to subscribe if you'd like. And again, as always, thanks for watching. Have a beautiful day everybody. Bye bye now.